Welcome to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Get ready to find your free will from your roots in the stars.
Hi, I'm Sue Rose Minahan, Talk Cosmos host, and today is February 5th, 2021. And we have a stellium that is 7 planetary bodies are in the sign of Aquarius, the 11th sign, the sign of the water bearer, which actually is of spirit. And what are those planets? The moon, the moon isn't always, because it does go 13 degrees a day, so every 2.5 days it goes through those 30 degrees. However, it is significantly in Aquarius this month. So starting with the moon, it'll be the moon, the sun, Mercury, closest to the sun, Venus, Jupiter, Saturn, and Pallas Athena, way out there. She's a strategist. So let's find out how this works as we rewire in the air world of Aquarius. We're ready now for Planet Buzz.
Focusing on planetary ecliptic orbital cycles and planetary pairs called synodic cycles connecting the planets at the same degree that begin our relationship, these are the members of Planet Buzz.
I'm Sue Rose Minahan, host of Talk Cosmos, an evolutionary astrologer and consultant, plus a certified color energy coach. I explore creative expression as an artist, a musician, and write abundantly, stories to poetry. I love investigating mythology's language, philosophizing eternity, and I'm a perpetual student of life, seeing oneness of body, spirit of people, animals, and nature.
I'm Leslie Francis, author of the 2019 and 2020 Llewellyn Sun Sign books, a practicing professional astrologer intuitive, a lecturer, and host of my own podcast, Coloring Outside the Box. My lifelong search to understand what it is to be human led me to develop my own approach to astrology called purpose-centered astrology. I passionately seek to support people in their greatest act of creativity, living life, through consultations and webinars. Creator of star cards, I love talking and making people laugh.
I'm Tara All, an astrologer, writer, and artist who loves spirituality and metaphysics. I practice and teach evolutionary astrology, and I work with the tarot, crystals, hermeticism, and animal medicine. My approach is creative and experiential, and I created a YouTube video series called We Are the Planets through EA Zoom meetings. I also speak at conferences. Currently, I'm the resident astrologer and lead writer for Sage Goddess, and I serve on the ESAR board as marketing director.
And I'm Dr. Laura Tad. I have a Ph.D. in human science and work as a spiritually oriented psychological astrologer with people around the world. I teach and lecture on astrology both in person and remotely. I have a blog. I have written for the Mountain Astrologer, Celestial Vibes, and Tarot.com. Additionally, I am the educational coordinator for Live Life Resources, an educational nonprofit specializing in resiliency training, education, and research.
And as the ancient Hermetic code reveals,
as below, so above. As above, so below.
Yes, Hermes to the rescue always, with energy going round and round, isn't it true? Well, we usually start off with, and it's always a surprise to me, however I say this, because suddenly I remember, we're to make some kind of a comment about something that is connecting to us about all of what we're talking about. So because I started off, I guess I need to come up with a decision. And I will say, what is the truth? What is the truth about authenticity? That is going to be the message of listening inward without projecting outward. Tara, what would you say? I know, it's like, what? we can go to Leslie. That's okay.
No, I think that, I mentioned this probably our last time we were together on Planet Buzz, but I still feel like we're in a phase of renegotiating relationships, and not just with each other, relationships with ourselves, and just our relationship that we have with life. So renegotiation of relationships.
Thank you. And Laura, Dr. Tad, what would you say?
Sort of pulling upon what you both just said is the piece around authenticity, and that being part of our relationship with ourselves. Are we being our authentic self or not? And how also with Aquarius, there's often a lot of talk around Aquarius being linked with trauma. So the trauma or fear of persecution or fear of ostracism if we are our authentic selves, and that being part of what's coming up for a lot of us right now is this pull to be authentic, and yet this pulling back and fear of the repercussions if we are.
Yeah, which reminds me of conditioning. Yes. And Leslie Francis.
Well, so my take on it, which builds on the things that have already been said, which is, be prepared for those unexpected, so moments of clarity that illuminate how and when you are being authentic and when you're not being authentic, and when the fear that Dr. Laura was talking about kicks in, and how often we allow fear to get in the way of us actually being what's really at our core.
Gee, I think we do have this pretty well surmised as far as just a base. Isn't it the truth? In February 1st, Venus started as the first planet because Mercury, although it's closer, as we know, to the sun, had already started its transit. So it's later in the degrees of Aquarius. But Venus, Venus is a dispositor of Uranus that rules one of the co-rulers. And we'll just announce now that we are recognizing, for those traditional astrologers, that yes, Saturn is a ruler, but we're identifying as evolutionary astrologers that Uranus is got a say in all of this, and it is ruled by Venus.
Right now it's by Venus, because
thank you. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's in that 7-year transit. Yes, in Taurus. Thank you, Tara.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I think we're going to see a lot of sudden breakthroughs, both in relationships and possibly breakdowns.
How about breakthroughs, Leslie? Breakthroughs. That's so much nicer.
Well,
but a breakdown doesn't mean you can't build it back up again. Yeah,
and actually it goes along with that trauma, because as we were saying, if we don't recognize some of the signs, it can be apparent that it's sudden, whereas actually perhaps it wasn't. So that's a notable. And it really gets down to our values. There is some, and I will say a thought as I try to spur this is that I noticed that Pluto in Capricorn, which is changing those conditions, of the structures of institutions and everything that we've been living with, that's still in late degrees, 27, 28 degrees of Pluto, I think. But it isn't always aspected. I noticed even in the new moon that it has a sextile to Neptune, I think. But anyway, it's pretty independently always doing, yes.
It's so funny because it's actually really close. It's 25 degrees Capricorn. It's actually really close to the Aquarian stellium. We're 10 degrees, but wide orb, but it's close enough to kind of poke at it, but still a little bit of distance, which makes me feel like it may have more impact than we are giving, than we are actually thinking about. Yeah,
I believe so. It's really an undercurrent.
Yep.
Well, it's kind of in the background. It's like behind, like if you think about behind. It's,
yes.
It's in the background, stirring. I was going to say shit up.
Yeah.
Well, and in Capricorn, it's almost like the father looking over, almost, or monitoring the energy that Aquarian stellium can stir up of like, don't get too crazy. I'm watching you.
Indeed. And people, go ahead.
Oh, no, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just thinking, and people are welcoming that sense of familiarity, because, that's the struggle too, is how are we putting together pieces of this puzzle where the puzzle picture is actually changed. Those pieces aren't fitting into it. But we're welcoming the father that looks like maybe that authority role that we're familiar with.
Leslie, when you were talking about, like, you said something about how do we know we're being authentic, or how do we know we're in authenticity? And I would love to hear from all of you what your sort of, how you feel like that you are, because this came up for me personally today in a whole different context, right? And then I had a conversation with someone literally about shared frequencies. And it's interesting because it came up about collaborations like we're doing right now, and sort of like, do you feel like your personal frequency is authentic with that group frequency, which has got me thinking about a bunch of different things in my life. So I was just curious, as far as to you guys, like, how is it, that like, what is it? Is it a feeling in your gut? Can you feel yourself aligned with something? What, and maybe because for the listeners too, like, how do you know when you're in the authenticity zone?
No, that's a really good question.
You're the Aquarius. I figure you should have the.
I spend my whole life trying to release myself from the South Node in Libra. Anyway, I actually think there's a certain element of joy to it. Like, there's a sense of I feel really happy in my space. I'm not in anybody else's space. I'm in my space. It's like stripping everything away. And so, because lots of people just, you get so involved in the outer experiences of your life that you forget how to sit with yourself. And so, for a lot of it might, for like oh, good Lord, in reference to what I said earlier, I think it has to do with you may find yourself saying things that you've always wanted to say and you never said, and then all of a sudden it just falls out of your mouth.
That's good.
Yeah.
And anyways, Laura, do you have an idea? Because
Sure. Yeah. I think, there's layers to go through with this, but I think I agree with the joy. I think that there's a flow. It's like, there's an effortlessness to it. And it's like true knowing, that deep knowledge that can also really be Aquarian, right? And it's sort of the opposite of what they talk about in sociology sometimes, of this theory that our sense of self is derived from what's called the looking glass self, which is, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I'm who I think you think I am. And that becomes our identity.
Oh, that was a bad marriage for me. My first one didn't work.
Thank you. I had one of those too.
I realized that later. I thought,
hands up.
Yeah. Well,
and if we can divorce ourselves from that, literally, then we're in that authenticity, because we're not living into our perception of other people's projections.
God. That's excellent. And I want to add something else. And I'm thinking it's sort of kinetic. When I really feel like things are happening, there's a certain trust, which is so scary. And I'm beginning to think, if we're talking Aquarian, there is that fixed grand cross, right, with Scorpio and Taurus, along with Leo. And so it's because I'll get support from, it's like a fall in pattern. Things fall into pattern. Maybe people connect, or, and it evolves. And so I really welcome these other ideas of the joy, because sometimes there's other feelings involved that, that work with that. But it's, really a good reasoned authenticity. And also there's this other side where there's accountability, which is maybe the Saturnian side, that sometimes, the consequences of life happen that, instead of projecting blame, which one realizes finally in life is a dead end street because they don't care. It's what is oneself going to do about life. And so it's that sombering of realizing how one really authentically felt, what one authentically did. This isn't in the wake up, grow up phase of dealing with shadows, that there's a calm, there's like there's a truth because it leads a direction. There's a way to manage, that you can work with it, that you have
it's almost like being in the zone that they talk about in sports.
Yeah. And I think that's what I meant by being in the frequency, it's like you just, and it's an easy way to think about this for anybody listening is whatever house Uranus is in for you, this is where this type of authentic experience in particular, like, you're wanting and trying to have. We just spoke about marriages. Well, mine's in the 7th house, so we can definitely see how that happened there. But I was thinking, Sue, as you were talking, even if it's crazy, even if it's upsetting or whatever, there's a sense that it's like real and true to you. And I think for me, even if there was chaos around, there's a calm that you're being true to you. So and joy comes with that too, even when circumstances are crazy, it's like.
Yeah, and because I think also because it does relate back to the grand square, Taurus is self-reliance. That they have that. And if it involves your Scorpio with your exchange of resources that maybe didn't empower you or could empower you either way. And then, of course, with Leo, it makes you feel like, hey, I'm okay. I can shine, baby.
Self-expression. You can let it go. You can let it out.
Yeah, exact. And there was another thought, but that's okay.
Well, and again, I think that, people can expect, I don't know, the energy feels pretty swirly lately. And I have a stellium in Aquarius, so maybe it's amplified for me. I don't know. But it's like all this possibility and trying to draw down, we realize that we're in a liminal transitional phase where we're moving away from a structure that worked until it didn't work, which is essentially how life goes. Yeah. And here we are in this space trying to figure out what's going to happen next. And when, with this, I think, again, it's back to drawing on what's within, because trying to figure out what you should do based on what's out there. And Aquarius is often about finding that part of yourself. I hate to use the word unique.
Mm. Well, it is one's own authenticity. So yeah,
I like that better.
It does relate. And this all reminds me too of the factor that of the signs, it's a social sign. So it does involve other people, whatever house, because I was thinking mine's right at my midheaven. Mm-hmm. And like Terry, you were saying yours in the 7th. And that makes it the joy and the complexity of it, because we're networking with others. And so, it's that natural sense of also trying to work in accommodation with a relationship, the other, so in other words, it's a good question. Well, going to the thought of the positive too, because I'm thinking Mercury is retrograde right now during this time, and it goes back to 11 degrees on February 20th. So that's almost when the sun exits, or it might be when the sun exits Aquarius, goes into Pisces.
Yeah, it goes to Pisces on the 18th.
Oh, okay, then very good. Thank you. So in other words, Aquarius is intuitive. It brainstorms. There is this gateway we were talking about because of the trine Uh, Essentially, this is pretty potent to have 7 planets. I don't know as stelliums if this really ranks right up there with one of the largest numbers, and particularly with the great conjunction, the grand mutation going into this. It's really like like if I was leaving a port, it looks like the wake, it opens, going out to sea.
Well, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction happened when the sun was at 0 Capricorn. So that's definitely an initiation point, but this is the first. So now we're in that space of it's like jumping into the deep end of the pool. Before the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction said, okay, here's the water. Here's the water. Put your toes in, kind of get used to it. And now, you can be fully immersed in what that energy represents. And when I say that I want to caution people and say, you don't need to figure it all out in the first 10 seconds that you feel that energy rush into your body.
I know what I want to tie this in. Laura, we talked earlier, we were talking about, going along with this uniqueness, authenticity of Aquarius, it's self-identification. And that also it had to do with reframing with the words, which has to do, but it was also about the elephant. Remember, you were talking about the illusion.
Yes. So I had been watching this documentary that's on Netflix, and part of what the show postulated was, the fable of the 5 blind men, 7 blind men, who are all touching different parts of the elephant, so they all think it's something other than what it is, because they're touching different, one's on the legs, one is on the trunk, and one's on the tail, and one touches the ears, and they don't know until they talk, are they able to discover, oh, well, it's an elephant. Well, in this show, they hypothesized, well, but what if they were all right? What if they were correct, and it's actually a tree and a snake and a bird, and that this creature that then they labeled an elephant was actually a magical creature. And again, it sort of gets into this looking glass self of our identity being tied to what other people have named us to be rather than who we really are. And I do think part of, and maybe because my Uranus is in the 11th, that part of this too is the authenticity of others and welcoming the fact that, to use the word unique, right, or the authentic difference that we each possess, that we each bring something uniquely different, authentically different and individual to the table. And so like with the fable, it's like, so what if that creature wasn't an elephant? What if it was this magical creature? And how much have we lost in our culture, in our society, by trying to label things or ourselves something other than what they actually are? We try to box them into a simplicity that they maybe don't possess. And Aquarius sort of blows the doors open and to that possibility of, it's sort of, it's right before Pisces, which is imagination, but it's another aspect of that imagination.
And then trine North Node in Gemini, that's all about open-mindedness, like rename it, relabel it, recategorize it. It's like Gemini is the ultimate flexibility and multiplicity. So when you were talking about, touching the leg or touching the trunk or whatever, Gemini, like the idea of that there is multiplicity, I think is here too. Yeah.
Yeah, and that will be, I believe, isn't that on the new moon on Aquarius, which happens to be Chinese New Year too, on the 11th. And the sun and the moon will be 23 degrees Aquarius, but looking here, Venus and Jupiter, thank you, are going to be 12 degrees. And of course, then so that's really the two, well, no, that's right.
Well, yeah, Sue, but Jupiter conjunct Venus at the new moon, that's all about renegotiating relationships. I mean, looking at them differently.
Thank you. Thank you for, expressing that. That's right. It really is. This business of labeling, isn't it interesting? Because the nodes are in Gemini and Sag, ruled by Mercury and Jupiter. And so the philosophy and the communication, and essentially with Neptune squaring it, and not only Neptune, I think there's who's next to Neptune right now.
Spirit is close.
Yes, reclaiming everything.
But listen to this though. At the new moon, it's not just Jupiter and Venus that are conjunct. Mercury is just 3 degrees from Jupiter. That means the rulers of the South and North Node are conjunct at that new moon. Talk about mental integration. Like that's ultimately like the bringing the right and the left side together, to be anatomical about it, but to be more metaphysical about it, it's whole-mindedness.
Yeah. And I think you were also mentioning it opens up that communication beyond what we perceive. Thinking too that Aquarian is that intuitive self. And intuitive, perhaps we can think of it, I always think of it as that flash of lightning. So of course we see something, and Rick Levine speaks of that often, and then it's gone. We've seen it, right?
Well, and I think I've mentioned this on the show before. It's this concept of, in science and higher math, they call it tacit knowing. And it's when you know something, but you don't know how. And so like in higher math, they use it where they have the solution, but they don't have the formula that gets them there, right? Or in our own lives, Tara, you walk into a room and I recognize you. I couldn't tell you what it is specifically about you in that split second. I recognize you. We just know. And those things, and it can be more metaphysical too, when we just that knowing, and then you have to almost like backtrack into the cerebral logical of like how you got to that knowledge.
I think Einstein.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say Einstein, and then we're going to go, but he actually thought of his relativity like that. And it wasn't until they had the eclipse later. And in fact, he also thought about the black hole, which we now know about. And I was reading, okay, we'll be right back February 5th with the Planet Buzz. That's Tara All, Leslie Francis, Dr. Laura Tad, and myself, Sue Rose Minahan. Aquarius, see you in a minute.
While we take a break from this week's edition of Talk Cosmos, let's take a look at this cycle's archetype. We are currently in the Yang period of Aquarius, ruled modernly by Uranus and Saturn in traditional astrology by the ancients. By leaving a cycle based on governing structures through both man-made and universal laws, Aquarius breaks established patterns, permitting the energy of freedom, just as its ruling planet Uranus spins on its side and orbits backwards. As a fixed air sign represented by the water bearer pouring the spirit of cosmic energy, Aquarius seeks to find like-minded, intuitively aligned souls to connect in social groups for the elevation and improvement of all.
Talk Cosmos brings you leading-edge astrological conversations with hour-long programs each week on KKNW. While the show has gone live from Saturdays from 6 to 7 p.m., beginning March 7th, the show goes live every Sunday from 1 to 2 p.m. Pacific. In addition to the schedule change, Talk Cosmos weekly programs are also available to watch live on Facebook and YouTube, along with daily chats throughout the week on the Talk Cosmos YouTube channel. While you're there, make sure you click like and subscribe buttons so you can get the full Talk Cosmos experience. Or, if you'd rather listen to the show archives with audio only, the entire podcast collection since 2018 is available on most podcast carriers. So, grab your coffee, tea, or kombucha and enjoy the show.
Hello, astrologers. This is Carlos Galvan. I am spirituality and astrology astrologer from Mexico, and you're listening to Talk Cosmos on Alternative Talk, 11:50 a.m., where we understand how to implement our free will through the cosmos.
Alternative Talk 1150, talk radio for the body, mind, and soul.
Oh, what fun. I just love that new Hawaiian. It was brilliant. Yeah. Well, we have some other thoughts here. There was ones that will start just with whether we go anywhere with it or not. But Leslie, I know you brought up like that's new moon with Saturn square Uranus sets the table. It's the first of 3. And I know we've devoted a talk to it earlier in great detail. That was wonderful back in January. But really, I think it has importance to realize that this square is in Aquarius. And so it is breaking up like islands of thought to regenerate, forward, because it ties in, and maybe we'll skip through, but just to bring that up, Tara, you had brought up this idea of the pants too small that all of us kind of related on. And it was like, the autistic, help me with the word.
Authenticity.
Yes, can be almost forced on us if we don't read the signs, because we can get fixed, whether it's that square or not. Grand square, I'm talking about.
I forgot about the pants. Yeah, I was like, because the way this energy feels, so it could be different areas of our life. It could be your relationship, or just the way you think about things, or your job, or whatever your habits. But whatever that thing is that's become not a good fit, it's like pants that are like not one size too small that you could kind of deal with, but like pants that are like 3 or 4 sizes too small, and there's just no way, like you put them on and they're so uncomfortable. So uncomfortable. I also had a note when we talked before about collective consciousness and opening the door to collective memory. And I feel like, Dr. Tad, I think maybe you were touching on that, and it super interests me, this idea of all that Aquarian energy opening up that collective doorway.
Not anything in particular, just sort of that concept when you were, is this, rather than everything new knowledge coming in, it's collective memory of knowledge that we've possessed previously. Yeah. And that part of that liminality that we're in right now, right, which is like liminal space is a doorway, right? That's the translation of the German. And so it's this space between where we get to, the veil is thinner between the terrestrial world and the spiritual world, or the terrestrial world and the cosmic and the cosmos. And so stuff can bleed through more easily. And that collective memory, it's a little different than collective unconscious, because it's like it's collective consciousness instead of collective unconsciousness. And that with this, I don't know, astrologers debate if a stellium is 3 or 4 planets, but 7, there's no debate about this being in a pretty serious stellium. And, so it's this opportunity to just access such forgotten knowledge that's sort of just almost waiting to be remembered.
Yeah. And I would call it, and I think that because we're talking about Sagittarius and Jupiter, for me, that's wisdom. That's, turning to whatever source of wisdom, be it old or new, that really speaks to you. And I wanted to just say, we really haven't talked about how we think that this stellium in Aquarius is going to affect astrologers, since Aquarius is the sign and Uranus is the planet most closely associated with astrologers. And so, perhaps, because I think that there's also the need to build, and I know Sue was talking about it, about like-mindedness, about, building community and honoring and respecting all of those people who, are kind of like floating down the stream on the same boat as you, and recognizing that we all have, as we are doing in this panel, sharing our ideas and thoughts and really sort of pinging off of each other. This is very Aquarian. So I have to congratulate Sue for having the foresight to begin this on the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction.
Yeah. Well, before we go to that, I just want to mention, Leslie, this whole thing about remembering, and Laura, what you were saying too, is my note that I had was that we're all, this is always going on, but part of this is that we have this extra, I guess, doorway or portal into remembering what we really are. And to me, that definitely fits with Aquarius, but also with Jupiter and Sagittarius, because Jupiter and Sagittarius are back to the natural, like what we natural law and the nature of what we are. I have this image that always comes to me, you know, the star card in the tarot is the Aquarius card. And one of my decks is the Deva deck. And in that deck, it's got like all these little, like almost like little magical, sparkly little lines, like from the person on the earth out to all the stars and the planets touching. And then in the little booklet, which this booklet, by the way, doesn't give you much. And in the beginning, it says, we leave this up for you. You should, you know, make your own interpretations. But what it does give is talks about that star card, the Aquarius energy, meaning the exchange that we always have with the cosmos, and that we can, the giving and receiving and the balance and the realizing that those frequencies are open. So Leslie, when you and Laura were both talking, it made me think about that card and about that. I think that's part of remembering what we are is our connection out there, and that they're not just out there, that there really is, whatever you want to call it, these magical threads, or, you know, whatever the wiring is, it's not separate.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because, you know, what popped into my mind, typical Aquarius, in this, when you were talking, is this notion that the power that we seek actually comes down. It's not coming in from outside us. It comes. Yeah. I don't know if I'm making any sense.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
I really think that, you know, how many times have I said we're multi-frequency beings? Yeah. If we just knew that. And I think that this is a time when people are going to be sort of inundated with stuff that doesn't make sense to them at all. Right?
Yeah. I mean, I think I have two not really related thoughts connected to this, so we'll see how that works. But
it's Aquarius, so who cares? I'm ready.
So one is this with the star card that you're talking about, Tara. During the European Renaissance, one of their theories as to why astrology works is that our souls fell through the planets on their way to being incarnated.
Oh, I like that.
And so that is this, like, we're tethered. We like have Jupiterian energy. We have Saturnian energy because our soul literally like traveled through the planet.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That feels, I don't know if I get it, but I feel that's true.
Yeah.
I love that. Thanks, Laura.
Sure. Yeah. And the thought I had around us as a community with astrologers that you were talking about, Leslie, is I think it's about the community of astrologers too. And I don't know, one of the things that came up in my research for my doctoral thesis, I interviewed 6 astrologers for my dissertation. And one of the themes that came up is that we can be our own worst enemies in terms of our community, that the infighting or disagreement of which house system is the proper house system, or the various how splintered the cosmology is, understandably, can create a situation where we end up being our own worst enemies, with astrology being accepted by larger groups of people. And that there's trauma then for astrologers around that, of owning their authenticity, identifying as an astrologer when they fill out their taxes. Most of us don't, right? I don't. I'm a consultant.
Me too.
That's my legal profession.
Well, yeah.
Go ahead.
I just really think that, you know, here's what I always say. You know, when your client shows up at your door, they don't ask you to explain house systems, or, you know, what your approach is, or where you're coming from in terms of astrological terminology. They're showing up so that you can be there and be present for them. And I think that, you know, it does bother me sometimes that there seems to be a lack of tolerance at times. Like, you know, in my mind, you know, see, this is how I live my life. I read energy. And when I don't care what kind of astrology you practice. I care more about what kind of human you are.
Yes, I have some. This is all so gratefully heard from me. And when it comes to mind, really, as far as the astrology community, suddenly I got a little brainstorm. And that was to say, hey, we've been dealing with 200 years of Earth. Earth wants to put form to things. And if we have a communication that there was so much that was put to Earth, the whole Industrial Revolution last 200 years, so that when it came to whether Blavatsky or all these Leo, the various old astrologers and that groups of people back in the late 1800s into the 1900s were really trying to find a structure that they could communicate that would make sense, that would give some credibility and credence. And that got followed and is still getting followed there, and rightfully so. I'm not trying to, but there is a pendulum, and there is like the middle and the far ends, right, on everything. And so in some ways, this idea that we have to compete with science, that it's gotten to that we need to declare and have research, great. I love research, and I'm for that. But there is another side. If we think of Gemini, Castor and Pollux, the twins, they went between Earth and Spirit, and the communication, and finally got embedded together because one died. Castor is mortal, he's going to die, and the other one's grief-stricken, and they're connected. But they're not one, like Jason Hawley and that great NORWAC. And for those people that don't know, that's Northwest Astrology Conference. That's every year in Seattle, now online. It's a wonderful event. But Jason Hawley is an astrologer, psychologist in Santa Fe. And he was explaining in this one particular lecture that the twins seek their own as a reflection for kind of like an Aquarian. They don't want to be the other, but they need that confirmation, that response thing. So what I'm getting at in my wayward conversation here is that if we combining this idea of Laura, you had mentioned about the soul card coming down, just that kind of language. It's like we are talking about energy and spirit, hermetic code, as above, so below, and it actually starts as below, so above, and as without, as within. All the 6 directions are many directions, and so we need that kind of language. And I think the idea that the community gets together, and instead of, very idealistically, because it won't always be, as we know, but instead of always focus about structure and terminologies and defined, which has its purpose, but yet also it's like people getting together just to chat around the campfire, really sharing this new language of how to share their experience.
Sure. Well, then that's what I was like, rather than like seeing this stellium as an opportunity to break that cycle of compartmentalization within the field, and the authentic ways that what we each authentically bring to the field has value, and honoring that and holding each other up for that, because that's what's, it is from an energetic perspective too. Then the energy builds, and it has more lasting impact. Well, because there isn't this constriction to be protective of ourselves or the field.
So so that's so inspired, Laura. Thank you. Because I think what it's asking us to do is not just honor our own authenticity, but by turn honor the authenticity of others. So that it's that's how you, in my mind, that's how you create a community.
Yeah. I mean, in Aquarius, to me, it's all about individuals having the guts to be themselves and then let that come together. And I was thinking about this earlier today, and I'm thinking about it again now, that as we move into this 200 years of air, and we're with all this Aquarius, for me, like when I'm working with clients or with my students or with myself, pretty much all I'm going for is more room. I'm literally looking to make more room for more real me to show up. and I feel like that's so much what Aquarius helps us do, right? It helps us open up that space so we can find ourselves in it. It's really quite simple. It doesn't have to be very complicated at all. It's just that most of us aren't used to operating in that space. And we're also, as humans, just like in conversation, we're used to always filling the space. So it takes, there is like this art to like actually allowing the space to be there to see what naturally fills it in. You know how it is, right? Like when you're with a friend, it feels weird if you don't say something, right? So everybody always like, imagine being on a date, like a first date, no one ever wants to be quiet. You just fill the space in. Well, we do that other ways in our lives too, not just talking. We fill our space in all the time. And then there's not room. And then it's the tight pants again, right? It's the kind of back to the same thing. Yeah.
I love the tight pants because it really reminds me of the Capricorn energy that, you can go through life and create a structure in your life. And then at some point, maybe that structure is no longer useful to you. Yeah. And you have to step outside of what you know, which is what Aquarius is step outside what you know.
Yep. Even if it's uncomfortable. So,
Oh, and it is. No, I'm just kidding.
You have to break with the new pants,
Fly that elephant that has wings and legs like a tree.
Well, because when Laura was talking about that, I was thinking about a group of astrologers, and somehow sometimes some people are holding the leg, and some astrologers are holding the trunk, and they practice astrology in different ways, and yet there's a link, there's an energy there that binds us together,
which then begs the question that if there wasn't this my way is the right way mentality, what could it be? What's the potentiality that we're not even able to like conceptualize yet?
Somehow it seems, yes. And again, it's bridging that spirit within the physicality. It's really like if we look at Uranus and Taurus, it's allowing that spirit that we incarnated from spirit, and that we and I think earlier, like, what is this body? What is this amazing body that has fingers and talks and seems to know how to save thoughts?
Well, again, the human tendency to want to try to find one path to get to a particular place, instead of recognizing that there are many paths to get to your spirituality, to your understanding of astrology. So all of the people who practice astrology or study astrology, we're all contributing to a whole. And I think, with all these planets in Aquarius, perhaps we will come to understand that. And because Saturn is there, respect it more.
Mm-hmm. Leslie, I also like part of my answer to your, at least in this moment, to your question about what does it mean for astrologers and astrology. We have to evolve. I just really think that's simply like we even though there are things we can say, yeah, this is how it is, this is how I believe it is, like if we don't leave room to evolve, right, we are moving ourselves to extinction. So this is and that's true for us just the same as anything else. It's really and I've been thinking about this, like, what does that mean in my own astrology? And so, for example, for me, like, I explore the planets like in a personal way with a personal technique, which I try to let them show themselves to me. And this is part of it because I realize there's always more, and I want to know what that more is. But I recognize that if I don't listen, if I don't make space, there will never be room for me to experience more. And so maybe for us astrologers, sometimes, like I think someone already alluded to this, maybe we be quiet and listen to each other a little bit more. Maybe we leave a little space to just see what might happen instead of immediately saying, oh, no, this planet rules that, or whatever. That's what we all tend to do.
Exactly.
I mean, I'm including myself in here. I'm not, I'm
no, of course. Yes, you are. You're speaking beautifully. And it reminds me again, Uranus and Taurus, listening. That's the one thing. I love this idea of the room and the space because that's eternal. And it really has to do with Neptune and Pisces. But going back on some of these ideas that we've talked about that are really great clues to feed into this is that collective doorway, the memory, the collective memory possessed, that it's a space between the liminal, the forgotten knowledge, and also to the extend the language beyond the labels that we know, to really work with this unknown. If we look at the chart as it is, we have Neptune in Pisces for still 6 years. It's a long transit, 13 years. And we have the nodes right now, and we're all evolutionary to some extent, among other things, for soul growth. I should add to people that's the purpose of evolutionary. But it's the language. We're in the nodes of the language. Yeah. And shifting our opinions.
And back to what Leslie said, we're multidimensional. And that is so Neptune and Pisces squaring the nodes reminds us, that there's all these realms. There's a whole multiverse. There's so much more than our little idea of here's what life is. Even if we have a big idea of what life is, there's always more.
Well, and because Neptune squared the nodes, and, Jupiter and Mercury obviously are the rulers of the nodes, for me, that was an opportunity to cross a threshold. Like sometimes, you really do need to get out of that, the part of your brain that just wants to continue spinning its wheels and just, as you were talking about, be in the space. And I think that setup was an invitation to go there, to go to that world where everything feels misty and it's not formulated at all, because that is also happening as part of this process. And one of the things I'm really loving about our conversations is I think we're giving people an opportunity to see all of the patterns that are unfolding and trying to bring them together in some way that makes sense.
And the spaciousness we're talking about, that's mind. If you look at the Buddhist philosophy around this, the mind is luminous spaciousness. So part of this, especially with the North Node and South Node being in Sagittarius and Gemini, both having to do with parts of the mind, is recognizing that field. And that it is a field. It's not just a local thing in my head. See, the more that we can the more that all of us can get on that frequency, man, things in the material world can really, really start to change. And with Aquarius, that can be accelerated. And especially with Uranus and Taurus, physical manifestation can be accelerated. Sorry, Sue.
Well, no, it's fine. I see the clock. I do have to, and I'll say a thought, but I want to say that next week is going to be Cosmic Collaboration for our listeners, and that tonight I am with Planet Buzz, and that would be with Leslie Francis down in the corner, Dr. Laura.Chat up at the top, Tara All of Los Angeles below me, and I'm Sue Rose Minahan, and we're talking about Aquarius and the stellium. And I'm wanting to remember, Tara, you had brought it up, and we loved it, and we know it, that on this new moon in Aquarius, which is really the pivotal, it could be the first of 3 table setting banquets that we're all going to be enjoying for this year, is that Mercury in Aquarius is going to be trining the North Node that it rules. And also, it's along with Venus, and in other words, that because of their close proximity, there's such a large conjunction of mutual energies that are all at this banquet, having a big conversation that we're going to be living with. And the thing about Mercury, yes, it had been brought up that it's a portal, but it is the liminary space that, Laura, you were mentioning, that it is always so close to the sun that either we see it under the beams, as they're called, and you can't see it because the sun is shining so brightly in the night or morning, or else it gets out within, I think it's 28 degrees. Once it gets past 15 degrees, we can actually see Mercury either in the morning for a few hours or a little bit before sunset. So, but it is that space between the light and the dark, of dusk and dawn, that really opens up so many possibilities of viewpoints and everything. The luminous, the portal.
Yeah. And Mercury is a bridge. It's a connector.
Yes.
It's a connector. So if you want to move between pretty much anything.
No, keep talking. We have a minute.
Oh, I'm saying if you want to move pretty much between anything, like Mercury is your planet. And clearly at this new moon, that door is going to be wide open if you want it.
Yeah, that's what you said.
And welcome to rewiring your whole life.
Yay!
Well, Laura and I, is our final expositors. Laura, we got to talk. All of us, and we are more so. It's like amazing. Well, it's such a pleasure. And I'm so glad to have our audience. Do like us, do subscribe. We'll make it simpler for you to do that. We're Talk Cosmos YouTube now, besides podcasts. So this is Planet Buzz, and we'll be back, and we love you all. That's from Leslie, Laura, Tara, and myself. Hey.
Thank you for listening to Talk Cosmos, the show where Sue Rose Minahan and guests unveil astrology's ancient archetypes that continually build the collective experiences in our unconsciousness. Be sure to tune in next Saturday at 6 p.m. to continue finding your roots in the stars.